the fear of genuine connection. It's the invisible force behind the way you love. There's a reason why you pull away exactly when someone offers you what you've always said you wanted. And that reason has nothing to do with them. It's not about who they are or what they do. It's about you. About something deeper, something that can't be seen with the naked eye, a fear you haven't dared to face yet. Because when love starts to feel too real, when someone sees all of you and stays anyway, when they offer consistency instead of chaos, something inside you freezes. What speaks in those moments isn't your heart, it's your fear. And that fear has a name, the fear of genuine intimacy. This is one of the most invisible emotional patterns and at the same time, one of the most self-sabotaging, because it doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as rational thought. It's not easily recognized, but it shapes everything. Every connection you form, every relationship you end, and the way you run from love that feels too secure. Most people who flee from authentic love don't do it because they don't want connection. They do it because deep down, way beneath the surface, genuine intimacy terrifies them. That's the root of it all. Because if you believe true closeness means vulnerability, and vulnerability means danger, you're already starting from a place of protection. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's exactly what happens when your fear is the one making the choices for you. That fear keeps choosing the same pattern again and again, creating distance, finding flaws, manufacturing drama, or simply running away when someone offers you stable ground. But they awaken in you the most uncomfortable feeling, that if you let them truly see you, if you allow yourself to need them, then you'll be at risk of disappointment, at risk of being consumed, at risk of losing yourself. So you create reasons why it won't work. You focus on their minor flaws. You tell yourself you're just not feeling the spark. But that's the trap. You're trying to protect yourself from a danger that no longer exists. And that someone, the one who offers real love, becomes a mirror of what you're still afraid to give yourself. Permission to be fully seen, fully known, and fully accepted. This pattern didn't begin with them. It began with your story. With that stage in your life when you first learned that love was conditional, that closeness could be dangerous, that people who say they love you might still hurt you, or leave you, or control you. That programming rooted itself deep in your unconscious. And now, without even realizing it, you're repeating the same story, rejecting what your heart most deeply wants, hoping that somehow staying safe will eventually feel like enough. That the emptiness that comes from keeping everyone at arm's length will somehow transform into fulfillment. But it doesn't work that way. As long as your fear is in the driver's seat, all you will feel is temporary relief followed by profound loneliness. You push away, you create distance, you choose the emotionally unavailable, the geographically impossible, the perfectly imperfect person who can never truly threaten your walls. And when someone comes along who could actually meet you, who sees you and chooses you anyway, you blame yourself. Maybe I'm just broken. Maybe I'm incapable of love. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And in doing so, without even noticing, you perpetuate your own isolation. What you don't realize is that this dynamic isn't wisdom. It isn't being realistic or having high standards. It's a defense mechanism. It's the way your psyche is trying to protect something that was once hurt years ago. But here's the hard truth. No one is going to make feeling safe an easy process for you. No one can dismantle the walls you've spent years perfecting. And yes, that truth hurts. But it's also the key to your freedom. Because the day you finally understand this, you stop running from love. You stop finding excuses to create distance. You stop rejecting people who don't fit your unconscious criteria for emotional safety, criteria that, ironically, often lead you to the most emotionally unsafe people. You begin to realize that the discomfort you feel around genuine love isn't a warning sign. It's a healing crisis. It's your old wound being exposed to the very thing that can help it heal. If only you would stay present long enough to move through the fear. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of internal integration. That process begins the moment you have the courage to look at your fear without filters. When you finally see that your instinct to run comes from a part of you that was given very good reasons to be afraid long before this relationship. And that part of you, that frightened inner child, needs you now. Needs your awareness, your compassion, your understanding. No one else can face that fear for you. No one else can convince that part of you that it's safe now. That is your responsibility. And if you don't take it, you'll keep fleeing from the very connections that could actually bring you what you most deeply desire, to be fully seen, fully known, and loved anyway. So before you dismiss another person who offers you genuine presence, ask yourself, from where am I choosing? If you're choosing from fear, from old protective patterns, from the comfort of emotional safety at the cost of emotional fulfillment, then it's time to stop, to pause, to look at yourself, to listen, to heal, because you can't keep running from the very thing you want most. That's not wisdom. That's fear in disguise. And fear, no matter how familiar, will never lead you home to yourself or to love. This right here is the beginning, the root, the core of why you keep rejecting those who could actually love you well. But there's something even deeper you need to understand. Why does comfort terrify you? Why does emotional safety feel like danger? Why, even knowing they're good for you, do you find yourself pulling away? Let's explore that next, because within those questions lies the hidden logic of your fear. The reason why you keep rejecting what might actually heal you. The roots of your fear run deeper than you might think. When you were young, perhaps too young to even remember clearly, you learned something about love that shaped everything that followed. You learned that vulnerability could lead to pain, that needing someone meant risking disappointment, that letting someone too close meant losing control. Perhaps you grew up in a household where love was inconsistent, where affection came with conditions, where emotional needs were dismissed or met with frustration. Perhaps you witnessed the pain of your parents' relationship, saw how love could turn into dependence, resentment, or quiet desperation. Or maybe there was a specific moment, a betrayal, an abandonment, a time when you needed someone desperately and they weren't there. Whatever the specific circumstances, your young mind drew a powerful conclusion. Being fully seen and fully known is dangerous. Needing others leads to pain. It's better to maintain control, to keep parts of yourself hidden, to never fully surrender to the vulnerability that true intimacy requires. And so you developed a protective mechanism so subtle that even you don't recognize it. When genuine connection appears, when someone sees through your carefully constructed layers and offers acceptance, your system goes into quiet panic. Not the obvious kind with racing heart and sweaty palms. No, this is a different kind of panic, a deep unease, a feeling of something being off, a subtle voice that says, "This isn't right, this isn't exciting enough, something's missing." This is your wound speaking. It's the part of you that equates genuine love with danger, because genuine love requires you to drop your guard. It requires you to be seen in the places where you feel most exposed, and to that wounded part, nothing is more terrifying than being fully known. Jung called this emotional imprinting, the way our earliest experiences create templates for how we expect relationships to unfold. If your template tells you that love equals pain, or that vulnerability leads to rejection, then the healthiest relationship will feel fundamentally wrong to you. Your entire system will signal danger precisely when you're safest. The cruel irony is that you'll feel most at home with people who recreate the very emotional landscape you're trying to escape, people who are emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or who keep you in a state of anxiety. That feels familiar. That matches your template. That's where your nervous system paradoxically relaxes, even as your heart suffers. When you meet someone who doesn't fit this template, someone steady, someone present, someone genuinely available, your system doesn't recognize it as love. It registers as something foreign, something suspicious, something that doesn't quite compute. And so you begin to doubt, is this really love? Shouldn't I feel more excitement, more passion, more something? What you're really feeling is the absence of the emotional chaos you've come to associate with connection, the absence of the familiar dance of pursuit and distance, the absence of the hypervigilance that keeps you constantly alert to shifts in someone's affection. And without those familiar signals, you're left disoriented, questioning the validity of what stands before you. This is the first painful revelation. What feels right to you in relationships might actually be what's most harmful. And what feels wrong or boring might be exactly what your heart has been seeking all along. The most difficult part of this process isn't recognizing the pattern. It's facing what happens when you try to break it. Because when you get close to changing, when you find yourself on the edge of accepting genuine love, your defenses don't simply vanish, they intensify. Suddenly you become hyper-aware of their flaws. The way they laugh seems irritating. Their kindness starts to feel smothering. Their stability seems like a lack of passion. You begin to pick apart everything about them, not because they've changed, but because you're getting too close to changing. Your mind becomes extraordinarily creative in finding reasons to create distance. We're just too different. The timing isn't right. I need to focus on myself right now. There's no chemistry. All of these might be true in certain contexts, but in this context, they're not reasons. They're rationalizations. They're the stories you tell yourself to justify running from intimacy. This is when you might find yourself creating tests they can't possibly pass. Setting impossible standards. Comparing them to an idealized image of what love should feel like, an image likely based on the very dynamics that have hurt you in the past. Or perhaps you provoke conflicts, unconsciously trying to confirm your suspicion that they too will eventually hurt or leave you. The most insidious form of resistance is when you convince yourself that you're making a healthy choice by walking away, that you're practicing self-love or honoring your truth by rejecting genuine connection. But if you look closely, you'll see that what you're honoring isn't your truth. It's your fear. There's a profound difference between setting healthy boundaries and erecting walls. Boundaries protect you while still allowing connection. Walls ensure no one gets close enough to see the vulnerable truth of who you are. What makes this pattern so difficult to break is that it operates beneath conscious awareness. You don't wake up thinking, today I'm going to sabotage my chance at love because I'm afraid of intimacy. Instead, you simply follow what feels right, or more accurately, what feels familiar. And the familiar, no matter how painful, always feels safer than the unknown. As Jung wrote, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And facing the possibility that you've been running from love, that you've been the architect of your own loneliness, is one of the most painful realizations possible. It requires you to question everything you've told yourself about why your relationships haven't worked, why you haven't found lasting love, why you keep ending up alone. This is the heart of your resistance. Not just fear of intimacy itself, but fear of what accepting intimacy would mean about your past choices, about the stories you've told yourself, about who you believe yourself to be. This is where the real work begins, the painful, necessary work of facing what you've been running from. It starts with a single, radical act, staying present with your discomfort instead of escaping it. The next time you feel that familiar urge to pull away from someone who offers genuine connection, pause. Don't act on the impulse. Instead, turn your attention inward and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where in my body do I feel it? What is this sensation trying to protect me from? Because that's what your fear is, a protection mechanism. It's not your enemy. It's a part of you that learned long ago that certain kinds of vulnerability weren't safe. And it's been working overtime ever since, trying to keep you from experiencing that pain again. The paradox is that to heal, you must be willing to feel exactly what you've been avoiding. You must be willing to sit with the discomfort, the anxiety, the subtle panic that arises when someone sees you clearly and accepts you anyway. You must be willing to stay even when every instinct tells you to run. This doesn't mean forcing yourself into situations that truly don't serve you. There's a profound difference between challenging your fear of intimacy and ignoring your intuition. The key is learning to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of wisdom, a distinction that becomes clearer only through practice, through staying present, through refusing to automatically obey the impulse to create distance. Jung understood this when he wrote about the shadow, those disowned parts of ourselves that influence our behavior until we bring them into consciousness. Your fear of intimacy is such a shadow. It operates most powerfully when you're unaware of it. But when you shine the light of awareness on it, it begins to lose its grip. Start by becoming curious about your patterns. When did you first notice yourself pulling away from genuine connection? What relationships from your past might have taught you that vulnerability equals danger? What happens in your body when someone gets too close emotionally? These aren't just intellectual questions. They're doorways into understanding the specific contours of your fear. Then, begin the practice of small acts of courage. Allow yourself to be slightly more vulnerable than feels comfortable. Share something you'd normally keep hidden. Stay in a difficult conversation instead of finding reasons to end it. Accept kindness without immediately feeling the need to reciprocate or deflect it. This is the beginning of what Jung called integration, the process of acknowledging and embracing the parts of yourself you've been running from. It's not about eliminating your fear. It's about developing a different relationship with it. It's about recognizing that your fear of intimacy isn't a character flaw. It's an adaptive response to past hurt that's outlived its usefulness. Most importantly, this work requires profound self-compassion, because as you begin to see the ways you've sabotaged connection, you'll be tempted to turn that awareness into self-judgment. But that only reinforces the core wound, the belief that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. The truth is that your fear makes perfect sense given what you've experienced. Of course, you learned to protect yourself. Of course, you became vigilant against certain kinds of vulnerability. The question isn't why you developed these defenses. The question is whether they still serve you now, in the present, with people who aren't those who hurt you in the past. There comes a moment in this process, a turning point when you stand at the crossroads between the familiar pain of isolation and the unknown territory of genuine vulnerability. It often arrives unexpectedly, in an ordinary moment that suddenly becomes extraordinary through the clarity it brings. Perhaps you're with someone who has been patient with your defenses, who has stayed present despite your attempts to create distance. Perhaps you've just pushed them away again, using one of your familiar tactics: criticism, withdrawal, manufacturing conflict, focusing on their flaws. And suddenly, in the midst of this familiar dance, you see it clearly for what it is: not protection, but prison. This is the moment when something breaks open inside you, not to destroy you, but to finally set you free. You realize with painful clarity that your fear isn't keeping you safe anymore. It's keeping you alone. It's keeping you separated from the very thing your heart most deeply desires: to be fully seen and fully accepted, to give and receive love without the constant vigilance of your defenses. This is what Jung called the night sea passage, the necessary descent into the depths of your own darkness before you can emerge transformed. It's the moment when you finally face the truth that has been hiding in plain sight, that you've been the one creating the conditions of your own isolation, that you've been rejecting love not because it wasn't there, but because accepting it felt too dangerous. The pain of this realization is searing. It may bring grief for all the connections you've severed, all the opportunities for love you've pushed away. But beneath these emotions lies something else, something that feels paradoxically like relief, because finally naming the truth sets something free in you. Finally seeing the pattern clearly gives you the chance to choose differently. This is the emotional climax of your transformation, the moment when you decide that the pain of remaining closed has finally become greater than the fear of opening up. The moment when you make the conscious choice to stop running, not because the fear is gone, but because you're no longer willing to let it determine the course of your life and love. As Jung wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The awakening to how you've been sabotaging love is painful, but it's a different kind of pain than what you've been carrying. It's the pain of growth, of transformation, of finally allowing yourself to heal. The path of transformation isn't linear. It doesn't move cleanly from fear to courage, from closed to open, from defensive to vulnerable. Instead, it spirals, sometimes bringing you back to familiar territory, but always with new awareness, new tools, new capacity to choose differently. This is the dance of healing. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There will be days when the old fear rises again, when you feel the instinct to run from connection. The difference now is that you recognize these moments for what they are, not truth, but habit, not protection, but avoidance. Gradually, you develop a new relationship with your fear of intimacy. You learn to hear its warnings without automatically obeying them. You learn to distinguish between genuine intuition about someone who might actually harm you and the generalized alarm that sounds whenever anyone gets too close. This is what Jung meant by making the unconscious conscious. The fear doesn't disappear entirely, but it no longer operates in the shadows. It no longer disguises itself as wisdom or discernment or high standards. You see it clearly for what it is, a part of your history, not the whole of your future. As this transformation deepens, you begin to experience intimacy differently. What once felt threatening now begins to feel like coming home. What once triggered panic now invites presence. The vulnerability that used to seem like weakness now reveals itself as the ultimate strength, the courage to be seen exactly as you are. Most importantly, you find yourself able to let love in, not the desperate, anxious attachment you may have mistaken for love in the past, but something quieter and more profound. Something that feels like peace rather than chase. Something that expands rather than constricts. Something that encourages your growth rather than exploiting your wounds. The greatest irony of healing your fear of intimacy is this: the vulnerability you've been running from turns out to be the very thing that sets you free. By facing your fear, by staying present with the discomfort, by choosing connection even when it terrifies you, you discover a strength within yourself that you never knew existed. This is not the fragile strength of walls and defenses. It's not the illusory strength of never needing anyone. It's the authentic strength of remaining open in a world that has given you every reason to close down. It's the courage to trust again, not blindly, but wisely, with discernment rather than suspicion. As you practice this new way of being in relationship, present rather than defensive, authentic rather than guarded, something miraculous happens. The very qualities you once fled from in others become exactly what you're drawn to: emotional availability, consistency, transparency, genuine care. What once felt boring now feels like sanctuary. What once seemed threatening now feels like support. This doesn't mean you'll never feel afraid again. Fear is part of the human experience, especially when it comes to something as precious and potentially painful as love. But fear is no longer your master. It no longer makes your decisions for you. It no longer keeps you isolated in the name of protection. Instead, you've learned to hold both fear and courage in the same hand, to acknowledge your hesitation without being ruled by it, to feel the old panic rising without automatically responding to it. You've learned that you can be afraid and still choose connection. You can feel vulnerable and still remain present. You can recognize the risk of love and still determine that it's worth taking. As Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. When you stop rejecting love out of fear, when you allow yourself to be seen and known and held in your entirety, you become more fully yourself. Not because someone else completes you, but because in the mirror of genuine connection, you finally recognize your own wholeness. The path from fear to love is never complete. It's a road you walk every day, with every relationship, with every opportunity to choose connection over isolation, vulnerability over defense, authenticity over impression management. Having faced your fear, having experienced the freedom that comes from choosing love despite it, you now possess something invaluable. The knowledge that you can survive being seen. That vulnerability, while still uncomfortable, won't destroy you. That needing others doesn't mean losing yourself. That the risk of love is worth taking again and again. Most profoundly, it changes how you love. Not from your wound, but from your wholeness. Not from your fear, but from your courage. Not from lack, but from fullness. This is the gift that awaits on the other side of your fear, the ability to love and be loved without the constant vigilance of your defenses. The ability to remain present in the face of uncertainty. The ability to choose vulnerability not because it's comfortable, but because it's the only path to the connection your heart truly desires. It's been within you all along, waiting for the moment when you would be brave enough to claim it.